Okay, so with that context and in the backdrop of increasing debt, increasing national debt, I should say, and the fact that the government is running in a deficit, so as I say, it doesn't have as much money to do the things it needs to be doing, i.e., maintain the roads, maintain infrastructure, invest in public services. I think there's going to be restrictions on public spending, on departmental spending. There may be cuts in certain departmental areas. Um, at the very minimum, there will be a slower increase in public spending, and that's typically what governments do. So if they plan to spend 50 million next year, then basically they would cut it to a 25 million increase. So there's still an increase. It's just a smaller increase, or there could be an absolute freeze. And I think we're going to see something like this in this announcement. As I say, I think there's a huge, overwhelming pressure on any government, I think, but certainly the Labour government, to basically address the surplus, I mean, so the deficit, and to address and bring down the amount of debt that the country is in, that the UK is in. And this is something the Chancellor has, talked about. And it's something, she's sort of put her reputation on, that she's going to basically balance the books, get the books in order after the mess, the Conservatives left. And I think if you're not going to raise taxes, then what else can you do other than make cuts? And again, this will be positioned as efficiencies, as innovation. But the reality is it's austerity or austerity light. And that's really what this is going to be. So one of the things you may have heard at the time this video came out was that there was going to be changes to migrant rules. So this was the rules around indefinite leave of stay, where migrants can come in, they work for 5 years, and then they can basically potentially be eligible for indefinite leave of stay, or even potentially citizenship, and then they'd be then eligible for benefits and full workers' rights, as you would expect from any other British citizen. Now, what they've done, and this is something the Home Secretary announced, was that they are looking to, or may have done already, extended that wait period from 5 years to 10 years. Now, politically, this will probably be a very popular change, because there is a sentiment that economic migrants are coming to places like the UK simply to take advantage of what is viewed as very liberal and generous benefits. Now, that's one way of looking at this, and I think if you are looking at this from a sentiment-driven political perspective, then it's an absolutely fine policy, I would argue. But economically, I don't think it will have any major or significant impact on the level of public spending, because what you find with migrants that are not able to fully integrate, whether that's economically or otherwise, is that it takes them longer to contribute to society, which is obviously what you want migrants to do. You want them to pay taxes, you want them to integrate, and if they're not able to work because there's restrictions about their work status, because there's there's this ambiguity about whether or not they're going to stay in the country, then it just makes it harder for them to then contribute to society in that way, start paying their fair share of taxes, and ultimately they're probably going to be needing some kind of support anyway, unless you deport them or unless they leave. And I think for me, that's something that has to be considered. And the other sort of elephant in the room in this scenario actually is that, in a scenario where people feel that they can't contribute, it can lead to marginalization. So it almost has the opposite impact of what you're actually hoping for. And it can create a scenario where people are susceptible to radicalization, for example. So I think for me, economically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. As I said, I don't think there's going to be a lot of gain out of it. But I think in terms of sending the right political signals, it may be viewed as a win potentially, in terms of how it goes down with the general electorate. But what I will say, to be fair to the UK government, is that they will know this. They will understand that this is not something that economically is going to move the needle very significantly into a positive space. And that is why it was announced by the Home Secretary rather than the UK Chancellor. So basically what I'm saying in a roundabout way here is that the idea of restricting benefits and spending that's aimed towards migrants and non-UK citizens is not necessarily going to have the biggest impact economically. Unfortunately, any types of cuts that we see in this space are probably going to impact those that are struggling the most, who are UK citizens. And there's no getting around this if there's no willingness or appetite to consider taxing those who at the moment, based on their level of net wealth, do not pay as much as those who are, a lot poorer than them. I.e., if you're not considering any kind of asset tax or wealth tax, then the only thing you can really do is restrict public spending, i.e., start moving towards a smaller state, and increase the burden on working people. That is really the only way I think you can address this. If, as I say, you're not prepared to do anything else. And I think this has been the major criticism I would have of Labour and past governments, whether it's Conservatives or the Libs or whoever, where this sort of very moderate, sensible tinkering of economic and tax policy is supposed to, over time, somehow work. And history has shown us, it's not really working. And more of the same is the definition of, and expecting different results, apparently is the definition of madness. So again, I just feel as though we're in a situation where the UK government doesn't really have a choice. And as I say, I will expect there to be, unfortunately, cuts to spending, cuts to welfare that will disproportionately impact UK citizens who are struggling already.